הבהרה, התוכן המשודר מבוסס על עדויות אישיות של מרואיינים אשר נאמרו על דעתם בלבד. אין לראות בתוכן משום המלצה כלשהי לרבות המלצה רפואית ואו נפשית, ואין לראות בו משום עידוד לביצוע פעולות כלשהן.
Iands Israel. החיים שאחרי החיים.
שלום וברוכים הבאים לפודקאסט המצולם של Iands ישראל. היום אנחנו נפגוש בחור מאוד מאוד מיוחד ומלא בידע בשם פיטר פנגור.
אדם באמת מעורר השראה, הוא חווה פעמיים NDE, היכולת שלו לפרק את החוויה על כל המשמעות שלה ולהעביר אותה היא באמת מדהימה, ושווה מאוד מאוד לשמוע את התובנות שלו. הוא הוציא מספר ספרים, אנחנו כמובן ממליצים, ואחד הדברים הנוספים זה שבעצם הוא מדבר על השילוב של המדע והרוח, שזה בעצם מה שאנחנו מנסים להראות פה בין היתר גם כן, את זה שהכל אחד, אין את המדע ואת הרוחניות, הכל בעצם זה דבר אחד. ואנחנו נרגשים ושמחים לארח אותך פיטר.
שלום פיטר.
שלום.
שלום
פיטר.
Shalom Henry, Shalom Hila. When I was 21 years old, I'm now 61, or just about. When I was 21 years old, I was living in the state of Montana, which is very far west in the United States in the Rocky Mountains on the Canadian border. And I was there to escape from my family, the suffering, the loss of my sister, who had vanished, and a breakdown. And so I was hurting on the inside. And it had been a 10-year situation. And so I left Boston, which is on the North Atlantic Ocean, and I went way out west, a couple of thousand miles, to go away for a year of school. And while I was there, I was a backpacker and a National Ski Patrol member, an outdoors person, backpacked all my life, and all sorts of weather and every season, including the winter. And so when spring came around and it was time for our spring break, I decided not to go back to Boston because I didn't want to see my family. And so I looked for an adventure. And at the outdoor club where I was a member, a man had posted a sign asking for looking for a partner to go to Canada, about a day's drive, a long day's drive from the Arctic Circle to this most beautiful place, amazingly beautiful Canadian Rocky Mountains, to go snow caving with cross-country skis, which is to live in a snow cave out in the middle of the mountains in the wilderness in about 10 feet of snow. And we did that for about 8 days, and to do 1 day of ice climbing. And I like I said, I was an experienced outdoors person in every season, and I'd been in the high peaks and well, I've been a lot of places by this point with a lot of experience. And I say that just so that you know that I wasn't crazy to be out there. And we were safe. We had really good gear, and everything was wonderful for every one of those days that we were out snow caving. It was just amazingly beautiful. And I'd been a rock climber, technical climber, but not an ice climber. And Tim, my climbing partner, my snow partner for the week, who turned out to be a buddy of mine, well, I won't jump to the end of the story yet. But Tim was a registered lead climber for ice and for rock. And I'd never ice climbed before, so I borrowed all my gear that I could borrow. And because I was a college student, having any money to buy the extra gear. And so I got an ice axe and an ice hammer. An ice axe is the proper tool, and you're supposed to use 2 of them, and you place them in the ice like that, and you lean them in, and they've got picks on the bottom, and then you can let go of the handles and dangle on the straps, which are about 1/3 of the way up the harness. But an ice hammer is much shorter, and you can't rest with it. You can put it in the ice, and you've got to grip it the whole time. I tell you that because that's what caused my problem. My problem was that as a result of having to grip onto the hammer for hours, on this climb. It's a world famous climb. People come in from all over the earth to climb in this particular place. So we got to the climb, and we were the last team climbing that day to begin our ascent. And because I had the hammer and the axe, the hammer slowed me down. So I couldn't climb as fast as everybody else because I couldn't rest by letting go. And I had to expend all my muscular energy, which burned out my muscles pretty fast. And it was about a 500-foot climb, and 500, 600 feet, something in that neighborhood. And by the time we reached the top of the climb, and it was a good climb, I mean, no problems, except for I was slow. And when we reached the top of the climb, the sun set. And at that point, we were supposed to be at the bottom of the climb leaving, because the temperature, which had been below freezing all day, there's 10 feet of snow, and the ice is feet thick on the face of the mountain. The temperature dropped about 30 degrees instantaneously. As soon as the sun goes down, temperature drops, we're in trouble. We're seated on a ledge with our legs dangling over, looking out over this valley, and we're only about 500 or 600 feet up. And there's a 10,000-foot mountain above us. So we're not even anywhere near the top. But we're in a very dangerous situation because of the temperature drop and the darkness. The hypothermia began to set in immediately, within a minute or two, because we were dressed for the day, but not for the night. And nobody brought up gear for the night. We were not, out of the norm for that. It was just a day climb, but we had consumed all our food and drunk all our water, and we didn't have sleeping bags or a tent or a stove or anything. So immediately hypothermia set in, and I started getting violent body shakes. My whole body was just shaken. My jaw was clattering like in a cartoon, and my whole body is just violently shaking to stay warm. And my partner, Tim, he's in the same situation. And he pulled up the rope. It was a double rope, a couple hundred feet long. And so I ended up in a pile and a knot between us because he pulled it up too fast, because we were scared. And because we knew that we were in serious, the seriousness of the situation is very difficult to exaggerate, because this is the circumstance where the first thing we realized is we were going to die there. It's like, oh my God, we're going to die here. And because it's so cold, and we were sweating all day long. Ice climbing is a wet sport. Ice falls down your neck and you sweat. And this was in the days before we had high-tech gear that wicks away moisture. Anybody who runs has high-tech gear that wicks away moisture. They didn't have any of that. We didn't have any of that. So we were soaking wet, freezing, sun goes down, ropes in a knot. I pull off my gloves to untie the knot, and my fingers immediately start to get frostbite. And I have all my fingers and all my toes, but I have frostbite on every one of them. They hurt. They hurt as soon as I live in a cold place, which some people think is crazy, but given what happened to me. But as soon as the temperature gets cold, my hands hurt. My hands hurt most of the year as a result. And I wear a mask most of the year before COVID. Okay. COVID, it's like I was already on the inside because I was already wearing a mask as soon as the temperature got to about 45 degrees, just because my face hurts. And I live on the ocean, so the wind's always blowing. So 45 degrees here is like 30. And I realize you're going to have to put that in centigrade. Sorry about that. Americans and their Fahrenheit. It's okay. So I say that to say that there's residual after effects. I have physical problems that even though I lived through this, every single day of my life, it's right in my fingertips. So the sun goes down, temperature drops, hypothermia sets in. We realized between the two of us that we're going to die there. We've talked about snuggling up against the cliff behind us. Like, I don't know if you have a translation for the word canoodle. Canoodling is when you're lying in bed together and you snuggle up really tight. That's canoodling. And so we talked about, right, it's the best feeling. And so we talked about that. But we realized that if we stayed there, we were definitely going to die because already hypothermia was making it difficult to talk. So we decided that our only chance of survival was to fight our way off the mountain. And either we were going to die fighting our way off the mountain, or we were going to die not fighting our way off the mountain. And so we decided that we were going to fight our way off the mountain if we could, and maybe live. So long story short, okay? The situation got worse as the night went on. We descended 2 rappels, 2 lengths of the rope down. And in that time period, the hyperthermia advanced. We both lost pretty much our ability to speak because our faces were frozen. Our brains were freezing, and we lost the capacity for reasonable cognitive thought. So we became confused. And we began to lose our physical coordination. And so the moon rose, okay? So the moon came up, and it was light enough to see for most of this descent, but it was very, very cold. And so as the night went on till we got to the last rappel, my feet became unbendable blocks of ice. My fingers were almost not usable, almost not usable. We did not speak to each other for hours because every time we spoke, we felt our energy level drop. Because, I was a 21-year-old skinny guy, no extra resources. And so I burned through all of my calories till I was consuming my body. And every time I spoke, I got that much closer to death for every word that I said. And as time, I also should say, I was petrified. Okay. I was scared. I was petrified. I knew I was going to die. And Tim, one of the reasons why we were partnered together is because we were both level-headed. Neither of us, you don't want to be in a wilderness situation, especially with someone you don't really know, who panics. And so we did a lot of talking around, tell me a story of when you didn't panic. Tell me a story when everyone else around you was, flipped out and you didn't. So we're both that kind of people. And so neither of us freaked out, but both of us were terrified. And the whole process of the night, I dug deeper and deeper and deeper inside myself to find the willpower to live. Like I didn't know how strong I was for having a desire to stay alive. I just didn't know that you can have a desire to stay alive so deep inside yourself that you expend every single breath and thought to make that real because death is edging closer and you know it. I had to control my fear to drive myself on. And it felt to me like I tapped into the deepest part of my brain. Like the survival, the early mammal, the early reptile part of my brain that's just stay alive. That's all there was for me. And so by the time we reached the last rappel, we had expended all of our energy. It was a couple hours before sunup. I don't really know. Didn't have a watch on, didn't pay attention, didn't care. All I was trying to do was stay alive. And so this is where the near-death experience really begins. So terrifying night to this place. And there are these iron pins in the rock, and there's little rings on them, and there's one way over there and one here. And so Tim is harnessed in on a carabiner and a strap, and he's to my left, and I'm on the right side, and I've got a strap to the iron pin. And I was standing on a ledge, maybe a meter wide, right? And so the rock faces right in front of me. So I take the rope, I take off my gloves, and now my hands are like blistered with cold. And so they're not really working, and I'm not thinking clearly. And so I take the rope, I have the rope, and I tie one part to my harness, and I take the other end of the rope and I throw it off to the side to pull it down through the ring that's 150 feet above us. And so as I yank it on the first pull, the rope is bent around a corner in the dark. So our last rappel was in the dark and the shadow of this cliff. And as soon as I pulled it, it jammed. Like on the very first pull, boom, I got no slack at all. And I only had probably 2 feet of like a little bend in the line. So there wasn't enough line to untie it and hand the end to Tim. And if I did, to have him help me pull it, we could have dropped it. And that was a big part of our talking about, do I untie the knot and does he grab hold of it and try to pull it with me? And we decided that it wasn't going to reach and I could drop it. And then we were definitely going to die there. So a lot of time goes by. I pull on the rope, I can't get it free. I get so cold that I feel like all of the blood rushes from all of my extremities into my core to keep my heart alive. Keep my heart alive and my lungs functioning, and my brain is still getting some blood flow to it, but all of the blood rushes from my legs. It's like it congeals up in here, and I got hot, which is and I'm gonna mention this again. I was in the National Ski Patrol, and the reason why I'm telling you that is because that's part of our training. Like hypothermia, I was the first aid guy on this trip, which meant I was the resource guy for if you break a bone. I've set bones, it like helps set bones in the wilderness kind of thing. And so I was the first aid guy, and I knew what was going to happen. I unzipped my coat. People who die of hypothermia are often found without their coats on, or they're found naked. Why is that so? Because the mind says to the body, you're hot. And so they take their clothes off. And so I unzip my coat, even though I knew better, unzip my coat. And Tim's like, don't unzip your coat. I'm like, I don't really care. And then I had this sort of feeling of peace came over me that I knew that I was going to die. And I was looking around this incredibly beautiful sky, no clouds, no lights for 100 miles, and just a million billion stars in the sky of every single color. And I had this feeling of peace that I was going to die and that there was nothing that I could do about it. And so I thought about my parents, and I thought about what it was going to be like for them. But I also realized that I was stuck where I was. And so I became sort of content with my circumstance. I accepted my end. And I began to fall asleep, which is the last stage, or second to last stage. So I began to fall asleep, and I collapse and I hit the rock and I wake up and I pull up, and I do that a couple of times. And I come back up this last time. And as I stand up, I get the last step, which is a tunnel vision where like a spotlight fade to black comes like this, and suddenly you get all of your vision just closes down into darkness. And I was confused about that because I'd never seen such a thing before. And as it collapsed and closed to darkness, suddenly there was darkness, but I still had consciousness. And it was not like sleep, because when you're falling asleep and the darkness falls and you fall asleep, you lose consciousness. But when this darkness fell, I didn't lose consciousness. I remained aware, and I didn't feel my body collapse like I was collapsing when I was falling asleep. I didn't feel anything. I felt like my consciousness was just still where it was, upright. And the mountain itself felt like it was not there anymore. And my vision, as the darkness came upon me, my vision expanded through the mountain. And it became a darkness that extended all the way out as far as I could see, beyond my fingertips to infinity, and out in the distance to infinity. But it wasn't like a scary darkness, and it wasn't like a darkness that I couldn't see in. I could see the darkness. Like when you go into a dark room and you pull down the curtains and you shut the door and it's a dark room, you can't see the darkness. Mm-hmm. But I could see the darkness. Everything I say about this is in metaphor, and everything I say about this is paradoxical. And from this point on, I tell the story in a sequence, but there's no time. Time itself does not exist. And so one of the side effects of coming back is that I entered back into time. And in order for me to make some sort of sense of what happened to me, not to mention the fact that I remember what happened to me when I didn't have a brain, I had to spend time trying to sense that all out.
Yes.
So I was standing there, and in the distance, there was like a pinprick of light pierced the veil of darkness at an infinite distance. And it pinpricked light, and then it rushed toward me faster than the speed of light, and became larger, and communicated telepathically to me with no language. I'm taking you, and I use that language that I've attached to it. Okay, that is not what it said to me. It was much more than that. It was like, you are mine. I'm come to collect you. And I put up all of my resistance. I put up all of the strength that I had against it, that I had dug in all night long. And it just took me like I was nothing. Like I weighed nothing, like I had no resistance at all. And the biggest impression that I had initially was of its hyper intelligence. It was hyper powerful and hyper intelligent, and its intelligence and its strength was so far beyond mine that I had no control whatsoever. I couldn't resist, and it enveloped me, and it carried me, and I was in comfort with it. So not only was it all powerful compared to me and all intellect compared to me, it was all comfort, and all of my fear was gone, and I just went with it. And this expanse of darkness sort of collapsed into a tunnel, the proverbial tunnel, but it also did not collapse. It remained infinitely large. And I traveled with this thing inside this angel, this consciousness, this intellect, but no wings and no halo, none of that. There's no physicality at all. I left my body behind. I left all of my molecules, all of my muons, all of my electrons. I left everything. There was nothing left of me that's physical. And yet I still had a consciousness. And my consciousness wasn't even physical. And it was carried inside of this other entity. And the next thing I know, I traveled this in great distance very rapidly, and either it expanded into all of this, what I'm about to say, or it left me inside of it. And I don't really know if there's a difference between those things. But the first thing that happened after it released me, I was in what I call the infinite illuminated darkness, or the eternal illuminated darkness, because the darkness extended in every direction. I could see in every direction. It wasn't like I could see up there, I could see down here, I could see in every direction at once. And it was infinite in every direction. But it wasn't just darkness. I could see its infinity. I couldn't see the end of infinity, but I could see that it was infinite. And I was an orb of, and I described this, all language I've kind of attached to it. I was an orb of consciousness. I was like 10,000 times bigger than Peter. And I was myself. And I remember thinking, this is me. How did I forget that this was me? That was never me. This is who I am. This is what I am. And so I'm in the middle of this vast, by myself, alone in the darkness of infinity. And I am 100% comfortable. I am content with what I am because I remembered myself. And then and again, this isn't, I tell this in a sequence, but it's not like that, because this is timelessness. And when I say timelessness, I don't just mean like no time. I mean like all time and no time. All time that runs, back to front and front to back and up and down. There's so many more kinds of time than we have just here in our universe. It's so much more expansive than that. And it all is all at once at one thing. So it's all these timelines and all only now. And so like a door opened in front of me, like a portal, or the pearly gates, whatever you want to call it. There was a light appeared in front of me, and this light was translucent and transparent. And in its transparency, I could see a long, infinitely arcing tunnel that I was intended to go through. I could tell. I was like, it was attractive to me. And this opening was translucent and transparent and shimmery and fluid and moving. And so I touched it with my being, my soul self, my consciousness. And when I did that, an act of will, I willed to touch it, it infilled me. I went into it and it went into me. And it was all these things at once. It was all life, capital A, capital L, all livingness, all intellect, all beauty, all love, all consciousness. And it communicated directly to me. Without language, it said to me, I am creator and you are creature. And not just Peter creature, but like consciousness is a creation of creator. And it showed me the origin of my consciousness. It showed me and I describe it, again, this is all conceptualization. It's not a thing itself, but I describe it like I'm a photon. I could see myself as a singular photon, and all of the stars of all of the, how many billions of galaxies with billions of star systems, all of the photons of all of those stars make one huge infinite light beingness. And I am exactly made of the same substance, but I am differentiated in that I am an individual photon, not a part of the. I am inside of the great sun of all photons, but I am also individuated and created by it. I am even in my consciousness state, I am limited in comparison to unlimitedness. Mm-hmm. And I was also superpositioned. I was like wave and particle at the same time, because not only was I an individuated thing, I could see the long wave of my life, of my soul, of my consciousness that was eons old. I was called into being, and I'll come to that again in a second. But I could see like other lives that I had lived, but not one of them was my soul. Every single one of them was a micron thin slit with great distances between them. And although they seem to project out into other realities, other worlds, which I cannot see now, did I see them then? I think I did, but I don't know because I can't see them. But what I saw was that Peter was not my only life, but not one of them was me. Me was this photon, this waveform. And when I was shown this, I heard my name called, but not Peter. It was the telepathic communication of the breath or the word that called my soul into being when I was originally created. Wow. And it reverberates. It is not only at the very origin of my creation, it is me. That sound is me. And it's always, even now, it's always sounding inside me, like a vibration of a string. It's always sort of, but it was individually me. And I knew that I was that, and I knew that I was created. And then all of this is happening, and I still had some of Peter left with me. And I then went through what I described variously as a hell of my own making, or a purgative fire of divine love. Because what happened to me was that as I suffered all of the pain all of the bad karma, all of the sin that I ever created in my life, all of the wounds that I ever gave to everybody in my life, every single person that I ever hurt in my physical life as Peter, I experienced that moment or series of moments from inside their bodies. Oh, wow. Feeling their pain, seeing their point of view simultaneously with seeing my point of view from that same moment. But it turned out that all of the pain that I gave them, I actually gave to myself. I was the recipient, and it was 10,000 times greater than I thought that I had given them. So the tiniest little slight that I gave somebody was much weightier in terms of the burden of the pain that I caused. And so as I experienced my life review going through in a sequence all of the pain that I ever gave away from their point of view, I simultaneously judged myself as guilty of causing unnecessary pain. And it wasn't just all the pain that I intended to give people, like my siblings in particular, because, you know, that's who you live around as a kid, and they're the ones you hurt the most. But all the other times that I didn't intend to cause pain, that came with me too. And I carried all of this pain with me, but I also carried all of this love with me. So all of this love that I had given away in my life and that was given to me, I carried that treasure with me too. And in the midst of all of this, seeing the suffering that I caused and judging myself, God showed me the divine, the spirit, the consciousness showed me all of humanity, and not just all of humanity, but the entire structure of all of the universe as being broken, as being dualistic, and that it was not my fault that I caused pain, because that's the function of being in a human body. You can't be in a human body and not cause pain. It's just the way it is. In the same way that the black hole at the center of our galaxy is currently consuming at least one star I've read about, everything gets consumed. Everything consumes something else. Everything hurts something else. It's just the way the whole thing is built. And so I was relieved of the guilt of how do I say this? That I was not the causation of my own capacity to create suffering, that was a natural result of being born a human being, but I still caused all the pain. Okay. So it's these two things in dynamic tension. Meanwhile, I'm in this infinite illuminated darkness, which is alive. Okay, it's alive. It's all living life, and it's immensely bigger than me. And the voice is speaking. The voice is right next to me, but I can see everything, but I can't see that. And it's speaking inside me, saying, "I love you. I made you. I forgive you. I love you. I love you." And it was like the pain that I gave away became a purgative love that sort of released me from all of the burdens that I couldn't carry with me into the infinite. And so all of this pain, I gave up myself. I gave up my ego self. My ego self died. My body was gone. I didn't have to carry those burdens anymore. They were material and physical. They had nothing to do with where I was. And if I had clung to them, I would have kept them. But I couldn't cling to them because it was so self-evident that I was in the presence of the divine that was so overwhelming with love and forgiveness that all I could do was turn to face it, although I had no face, because I had no body. I just aimed my heart of my soul at the divine and was utterly forgiven. And in the moment of my acceptance of forgiveness, I understood that forgiveness and mercy, love, bliss, adoration, paradise, intellect, knowledge, understanding, joy, all these truth, all these things are one thing. And all of this infiniteness of this place where I was, and there was no difference between heaven and God. There was no difference between these two things. Heaven was God, and God is heaven, and it all filled inside of me. It flooded inside of me, and I became radiant in its own truth. And I was expanded to the point of almost obliteration. It felt to me like one more drop of divine beingness, and I would have folded back into the being itself and no longer been limited. I would have found myself unlimited, merged in union, in union, and merged. And I said, "Am I dead?" And the voice said, "Yes, you're dead." And I said, "Well, I can't die now." Why not? Because my parents were suffering this loss of my sister, and my mom had gone through a decade of a nervous breakdown. And in that instant, I was faster than thought, sped and carried and brought with the divine to the edge, like the edge where our universe is created and heaven ends, like between the two spaces. And I could see all of Earth all at once, like a hologram, and 7 billion people. I could see every single person individually in real time. I was looking at that moment when I was dead. I could see all of Earth and everyone on it. And I could see everything that they were doing. And it wasn't like I had to look at one person and another person, another person. I could see them all at once. And I could see, and I could understand everything everyone was doing. And the voice said to me, in the way that I love you now, you now know I have always loved you. And this love love isn't even the right word. It's the word I use for it here because people are familiar with what it is to love somebody selflessly, and but it's so much bigger than that. It's infinitely larger than that. It's my eternal nature was never in peril. I was always the beloved. I was always the one chosen. But I was shown that was true of every human being, all 7 billion people. In the same way that I was always well, so is everybody else. And because they're well, all's well in the world when they die. And when they die, they'll be like you. And I saw, and they'll understand that I, God, am creator, lover of all, infinite power, and nothing comes to harm. And I could see my parents' faces, and I could see their agony of their inner lives, and I could see their agony of their inner lives without me as that increases. And I could see the less agony of their lives if I went back. And I said, do I have to stay? And the other something else happened, but it's immaterial to what it doesn't add to the story. You can read about it in the book if you want to. What I said was, do I have to stay? And the voice said, no, you don't have to stay, but I want you to stay. It's time for you to come. And I said, but, my parents. And God's like, but they're all going to be fine. I just showed you all is well with them. They're going to have to live out their life and suffer. But when they die, they're going to find exactly what you found, me, eternal love. And so come home. And I said, I'd like to go back. If I can come back here to this eternal bliss, can I go back to help? And God said, I want you to stay, but yes, you can. You can come back here. And I said, well, then I choose to live my life. And God said to me, you won't live your life, and sent me back. And as I was going back, I had choices on where to enter into that life again. And there was like 1 million openings. And in the middle, it's like a circle of openings, all these millions of little openings. And in the middle of the opening itself was the purity of the divine white light itself. And I had a second to choose. It was, the voice was like, choose the 1 million holes. What do you choose? I remember thinking, I want to keep some autonomy. I want to keep some autonomy, and I want to be a creative. So I made this choice. I chose to go back to my life, and I had all these choices, these entry points, 1 million entry points where I could go back into this life again. And it's like a big circle. And I had an instant, and the voice said to me, choose. And I had to choose either the very center point of the oneness of light itself, or 1 million other gradations of that spread away from the intensity of the like was a laser beam of divineness. And the voice said, choose your entry point. And I had to instantaneously make a decision. And what I remember thinking was, I want to maintain some of my bohemian lifestyle. I want to still be autonomous. I still want to have, I could see clearly that if I entered into the light itself, that I was going to lose most of my autonomy. And so I chose to go just off to the side of it. I did not go into the intensity of it, but I went in very close to it. And so when I saw all of those entry points, I also saw all of those lives. Okay, I could see them all at once. I could see all of those choices and what they meant, and I could see how they all interacted with each other. And I went in this one entry point, and the next thing I knew, I was in this. I had to make this decision instantaneously, and the next thing I knew, I was being crushed back from my 10,000 times bigger size back to this tiny, 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 tiny thing, and it was this painful reduction that was then I felt like I was being screwed back into my chest again, like twisted in on a rusty bolt. And it was just like painful going back in. And then the next thing I knew is I was back inside this body, and this whole thing was suffering. I had been in the place of no suffering, of healing and wholeness and bliss. And this thing was just raw suffering. And as I swam up to consciousness, I felt all of this pain of all of the parts of my body that were hurt and ruined by the ice. And I didn't know what was going on. I didn't understand me. I didn't understand anything. And so I slowly came back up to consciousness in the midst of re-entering the world of suffering. And after some period of time, my body was being jostled, and I was like, my body's moving. What is this thing? It's moving. And I didn't understand anything. I didn't even have language to think about it in. And eventually I feel being yanked, and I my hearing comes online, and I hear this screaming, and I hear this voice, and I don't know what they're saying because I can't understand language yet. And so suddenly I'm being kind of pulled, and I kind of stand up, and I'm in this thing. And I'm like, I'm in this thing. And I look over and I see Tim, my partner, whose name I don't know. And I see this face, and I hear this sounds, and I begin to hear what he's saying. He's screaming at me. You're dead. I was dead. You were dead. You were dead. If you died, I was going to die. And he's screaming this at me, and he's crying, and I'm bewildered. I am like, what is this thing? Where am I? How does this work? Why am I here? Who am I? I didn't even know who I was. And I didn't know where I was or what was going on. And after some period of time, my brain started functioning, and I started remembering, and Tim was coaching me, and talking to me, and he's continued to talk to me as I was like, I didn't listen to him because I was trying to figure out what was going on. Eventually, he got me to pull on the rope, and the rope came free in the first pull. And we descended. And because the parking lot was right across the street, we went over to the car, and we got the tent, and we treated ourselves for hypothermia. And this is just a medical note. You don't rush your body temperature up with hypothermia. You bring it up very gradually over a long period of time. And that's what we did. And then eventually we got into the car. We turned the heater on after hours had passed, so that we wouldn't overheat our body and die that way by mistake. So that's what happened. And then from there on, I'm not the same person. I came back to the same body. I am a different person, same personality, same characteristics, but I live every single day knowing I am not from here. I live every single day of my life, moment to moment. During my day, I see what's going to happen before it happens. It's not like an hour before it happens. It's like right before it happens. And so, when that kind of thing happens, people are like, deja vu. Oh, I'm supposed to be here. But every moment of my life is like that. But there were these 10 million possibilities of all of the choices I was going to make. And all of them were probabilities. When I was coming back into the world through these choices that I had, all of those were possible ways I was going to live. And so every single choice that I make is a possible choice, is a probable decision, is a reality that becomes real by my choices. And either the choices I make in my life lean me closer to the light, which is a natural outgrowth of being in the light. It just becomes the most attractive thing there is. And nothing else satisfies. I live a dissatisfied life. People wonder why I'm have sorrow and why I'm not the happiest guy in the world, because I've been in the place of joy and nothing compares. But on the upside, because of that, all of the decisions that I make me want to lean toward that thing. And so even though I didn't enter into through the one being of light, I'm still aiming toward that, because that is the only thing of satisfaction for me. And I like to have fun. Okay, I'm not like a dull guy. I live a life of adventure whenever I can have it, because I like, partly to distract myself from the fact that I'm not from here, but also because I just like thrill. And my whole life since that point has been in pursuit of the pursuer. And I'm going to stop there and let you guys ask questions, because I could just keep right on talking, and the basic story is already over.
You talked about the darkness that you felt, it was much more than feeling and seeing. What is that darkness? Because if it's all about love, it's all God is love, it's all melody of love. So what's the part of the darkness, and why there is experiences who experienced the darkness and there who doesn't?
Well, I think that all near-death experience is particularized, bespoke, individualized for each person. And so that God is of so much compassion that God gives us what we need, not necessarily what we want or expect. And so lots of near-death experiencers don't go through hell. I did. I expect to go back through it again, and I will go gladly. The darkness is not negative. Even the suffering even the hell that I went through was not negative. Darkness is not this, it's not bad darkness. It's just blindness. Like it was like, and it wasn't darkness that was like that room where you can't see your hand in front of your face because there's no light in the room. I could see, even in the midst of this darkness, I could see, but it wasn't illuminated like the light itself.
It was like a womb?
Yeah, I'll go with that. It was like a womb, exactly. And in the fluid of love, and in the ocean of the womb of love. That's what it was like. Thank you.
So the experience in the darkness, like the hellish experience, like not
that
really.
Was all inside of me.
Yes, it's the criticism that you had for others and to yourself. So that's the shame. The shame, I feel that the shame, it's the part that is, let's say, uncomfortable. So the shame, it's the hellish experience and the criticism that we had to others. And
yes, and how we didn't measure up to the potential, and how that it wasn't so much that I hurt them that was the problem, is that I wasn't living in the love itself. It wasn't so much that I'd made a mistake. It was so much that the divine love was so overwhelmingly, clearly, truly, absolutely all there actually is, that I was shamed. I was shamed of not in each individual choice, not choosing to live love in that moment. But I was also forgiven for being human. Not your fault. I made you that way, not your fault. I love you as you are. But yeah, it was a comparison. It was a comparison to what I could have been, but also it was a comparison to infinity. So my only measurement, and this is one of the things that I came back with, is my measurement is not to humanity. I see myself as immaterial, as unmattering, and as equally made of human flaws and beauty as every single other person. So I don't, people say, oh, no judgment. Do they say that in Israel? Oh, no judgment, when really what they're saying is total judgment. I have my hand up.
Yes.
Right. So, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is a radical equality of human nature, because my comparison goes to God, infinite, limited, unlimited, finite. And everything around me and everyone around me is just like me. Everyone around me is finite. And because they're finite, it makes it a lot easier to love them as they are with all their brokenness, and not judge them for their wounds. Because a lot of people, they act out of their wounds. You know, people are, you get road rage on the streets. That's out of the wounds they carry inside themselves. And
Yes.
it doesn't mean that you have to take it, okay? You don't have to, like, let somebody beat you up, but you can understand why they are that way. And so the shame that I felt was relieved by the unbridled mercy of love that I didn't deserve. And because of that, I still have a connectedness to that, that came back with me. And I want to be sure that people understand, I didn't pick this. This was not what I wanted in my life. And it was done to me. I didn't have any choice in it. And
why do you think it happened?
Well,
do you think you planned it? Maybe your soul?
I don't know if I planned it or not, but I do know that it was part of a bigger plan than mine.
There is no free will, according to your experience?
I had I don't know if you know the word agency. I had agency. I had free will in heaven. I still had the capacity to make choice, and I made choice. They're just parts of things that I'm blind to, and I try not to speculate on what I don't know. And I don't know if I planned this, but I can say this. I can say that I know that my soul is very, very ancient, and not in terms of time, but in terms of universal time, like billions, not thousands. And I know that in my life as Peter, I was warned ahead of time. I was already on a mystical journey when I was a kid. I'll give you a little fill in. When I was 5 and 6 years old, I had 2 mystical experiences where I was, one I was taken out of my body, and 2, I had a visitation. Both of them showed me the infinite nature of wisdom, and the infinite nature of infinity and compassion, and also gave me a glimpse of the smallness of myself. And then the year before this thing happened, I was backpacking in the winter again in New England, where I live, on a trail with about 8 inches of snow on the ground. And I had 2 vision experiences where I was taken out of myself, and shown that A, I was going to be given a gift to give away that wasn't mine, and B, the fire would not consume me. And in both cases, I was raptured or taken in an out-of-body experience by this same angel, this same intellect, through no willpower of my own, and brought to a place where I was shown these things kind of as a forewarning, but I didn't understand them till after. The access to the divine is available to every single human being, no matter what culture or religion you're in, if you go inside yourself and look there. And it doesn't matter who you are or where you are or what culture you're from, because it's inborn into the human being. And you don't need religion to do it.
I'll ask one of the ultimate questions. Why are we here?
I no longer ask why. I ask why about a lot of things. Why does the plasma field make it possible to create a fusion machine, the Tomatac? Why does that work? Why does my grandchild love me as much as she does? Yeah. I ask those kind of why questions, but I don't ask why am I here anymore, because I'm not from here. My orientation is not to here. My orientation is from above. So the purpose is to love and bring light here. That's all I can say is for me, okay? I can only speak for myself. My calling, My job here, my purpose here is to become as empty a vessel as I can be, to allow as much of not me here as possible. This light that shines through me, it is not Peter. It doesn't belong to Peter. Peter has no power over it whatsoever, except for the capacity to step out of the way. And so my purpose as a human being is to love as much as I can in the context of my life, and to get out of my way, to diminish my false self, my false ego, to the point where it's no longer preventing a larger flow of light and love into the world. And it seems to me it's this connective thing. When I connect with people, like I feel with you guys, there's this energetic field that is not mine, and it's the same as inside of you that's uniting between us, that is bigger than us. And yet flows through us. And so everybody wants, lots of people want answers. Like, they want to know what they were in their previous lives. Now, I don't really care what I was in my previous life, because that was fake too. Okay, that was not the wholeness of myself. My whole point in my entire life, since the day I came back, has been to practice an interior world, to access the divine through my interior world, to get out of the way, to allow as much of it as possible, is to be in the world through me, so that I'm less miserable here. So it's sort of selfish for me. My practice of aiming at the oneness of being is so that I have some sort of stability in the world, so that I'm able to function in the world through some sort of position of strength, but also place of balance, where I can function in a world that does not see what I see, is not in the place that I am, and denies that what I see is real. And so the leopard doesn't really ask why. Maybe the dog doesn't ask why. The moon doesn't ask why. They just are. And when we think of why are we here, we're always thinking about our human race. Well, it's much bigger than us. Okay, it takes. I just read this morning. The Earth has gone around, orbited the galaxy 25 times in 13 billion years. Okay, so now think of all of the star systems and all of the galaxies. Just think of the star systems in our galaxy rather, and the potential for life. Why are they here? Why is the whole thing here? It seems to me that when I see the light inside another person, it's the light in me seeing the light in them. It's God's self seeing God's self. And maybe God needs us to see at this edges of reality. I don't know. It's just that I'm much more interested in finding the light inside myself and seeing inside someone else than I am to try to figure out answers to questions I can't possibly know the answer to.
What you said, that you are not Peter, it's also like your soul filtered, and now you're Peter. So you're a part of God that forgot that he is a divine part.
Yes.
And you remembered, you had the option, you got the option to remember who you are. So how can we help people from our experience, help people to remember their divine part? Because we talk about love, be the love that you are, but people don't even connect to the love that they are. They don't connect to even to God. They think God is somebody there who is punishing and things like that. But how can someone love someone else if he is not knowing himself or loving himself like he really needs to? Not a fake love, buying myself things. That's not the divine love. How can we help people to express and to connect to God love that's inside of them?
You have to show it to them. That's really, at some point in our conversation, we were talking about language. And we can language things. Music, you can put the light into music, you can put the light into poetry, into performance, into language. We can talk about it as we're doing here, but the most effective way is to actually show it to them, for them to see it for themselves. And so how do you do that? How do you take the radiance that you know is inside of you and show it to someone else? You can do that through acts of compassion. So you can live a spirituality of selfless giving. You can give to the poor. You can help the old lady across the street. You can comfort the crying child. Those are all actions. But in a process of meditation, in the process of going inward and the expansion of the capacity of your own soul self inside your physical form, you get to then bring it to them personally. And so that radiant feeling that NDEers in particular feel between each other, that energetic form that flows between us, that thing can be enhanced. And so I think that we continue to talk as a group about the reality of medical science raising the dead and creating tens of millions of near-death experiencers globally for the last 50 years, of every religion and every culture and language, and atheists and everybody. It's the first time in the history of the world that spirituality is being driven by science. Like, we reached the pinnacle of the edge of heaven with our technology. We can bring back the dead, and what we didn't expect is that they come back with a truth, right? So how do you take that truth and give it to somebody? Well, you keep talking about it like we are. We make it safer to talk about so that more people talk about it. But really, for those who can't see, they're not going to see until their eyes are opened. And either God's going to open their eyes for them in an experience where suddenly they have a moment of timelessness. They're out watching the beautiful sunset over the ocean, and suddenly they have this transcendent moment of the most beautiful thing they ever saw in their life. And qualitatively, it's not really the most beautiful thing they've ever seen in their life, but somehow time stops, and there's a moment of seeing reality for what it is. We can't make that happen, but what we can do is practice a way of reducing the veil of our bodies to allow more of the light to come through us. And so when we see paintings of auras, when we see paintings of auras and halos and those sorts of things, why do you think that they put those in there? Why do you think that they're in art? Because people have felt that from them. You feel the aura of a radiant person who, and the more that we get out of the way of ourselves, the more the radiance comes through us naturally, the more it's perceivable, and then we don't need to tell them anything. All they need to do is taste it for themselves. They have to feel it for themselves. And when they feel it for themselves, and maybe you become a channel for it, and you become like an access point for people, but what they feel inside you is inside them. They get to feed off of that until they find it inside themselves and open their own door that they don't even know is there half the time. And then the door opens, they don't need you anymore, because all they have access, all they need is the light itself. And so the best way to communicate it, I think, is this way, is directly, but it's not easy. It's a difficult path, because a lot of near-death experiences that I've encountered come back with the radiance in them. But how do you make it bigger than yourself? That's the question. How do you expand it so that others can feel it? That's a valid point, right? It's like people are going to think, oh, it's just about human love. I know what love is. I know God. Well, that's just a drop in the bucket that's just a drop in the ocean. It's just like a molecule in the size of the universe for the expansive nature of love. So yeah, it's a good reference point, but it's not the totality of the thing itself. The thing that unites all mystics, and I'm going to talk about a moment about mysticism. Mysticism is a common human experience. And it has 4 basic components to it, according to one definition of it. It's transient. It has a beginning and an end, like a near-death experience. It starts and it finishes. It's passive. You don't make it happen. It happens to you. Mm-hmm. It's noetic, which is another word for wisdom. Sophia. Yes. For wisdom, the knowledge that is beyond the capacity of the brain to comprehend, and that's ineffable because when you can't speak about it. And the language of mysticism is metaphor. It's metaphor and it's myth and it's symbol and it's allegory, because metaphor is the only tool that we have to talk about what that thing we can't speak about. Mm. And once people understand that all of the mystical literature and all of the history of the world, and that is not an exaggeration, all of it is metaphor, then we have a starting place for conversation. Because then we don't have to attach to our stories as if they were true. Because a myth tells a story that's true with a capital T, not true with a small t. Because there are things that we can't talk about that are like so I heard it described as, so I'm going to tell you about an orange. And so an orange is orange and it's soft on the inside and it's juicy and it peels and it's got all these different parts you pull apart and you can make juice out of it. But now that I told you about it, if you never had it, can you tell me what it tastes like? You can't. So there were things that our logical minds cannot describe. And we use metaphor as the mystical tool to talk about the thing we can't talk about.
In general, we need to look at the similarities more than the difference.
And especially when we can even talk in the same language, mm-hmm. but have a different meaning. Yes. So it's also a separation for us. But if the meaning, if we are connecting to the heart meaning, which yes. is the Wi-Fi, yes. the internet.
Wi-Fi, it is.
All of us. So there won't be any differences between the meanings, because there is one language. I feel that because we're talking a lot of NDErs, there is one language, which is the heart language, right?
That's where I'm at. That's what we're talking about. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about communicating it directly. It's that language that needs no words, because all of us near-death experiencers, that we were telepathically spoken to. There was no language there. Yes. There's this thing that's beyond language, that's experiential, that we all now understand is real.
The things that you said about judgment, about suffering, there is a lot of people who suffers and they feel that they don't have any motivation for this life. And you talked also about, you chose life. You chose to come back. And there is a sentence in the Bible that says, choose life. Like,
choose life.
It's not easy. Like, if you need to ask something from God, just ask for, I want to choose life.
I think people don't understand what prayer is. People think prayer is asking for things. Mm-hmm. Give me the car, fix my broken leg. It's asking for life itself with a capital L. You ask for the presence itself. And that is true around the world also. You desire no thing. You desire the oneness of being itself. And when you are open to that choosing of life itself over everything else, then you get the divine presence living in you. And then you don't need language anymore to communicate it, because it's actually inside you, alive. And so that's the essence of prayer. It has all these different languages to it: the stillness, the choosing life, choosing love. But it all comes down to the divine presence itself, choosing that over everything else, over yourself. That's what parents do naturally. Parents who care for their kids, in every moment of the day when they'd rather be doing something else, they choose their children above themselves. And so there's this thing in human beings that's built into us that is a teacher for us of what selflessness is.
Yes.
And imagine that God is the most selfless being in all that ever was. That is why God comes to each of us individually, because it's selfless. God reduces God's self to meet us where we are, not where God wants us to be, but where we are. And in terms of seeing the other as ourselves, seeing inside the other person, it's really the light seeing the light. The light in me sees the light in you. The God self in me sees the God self in you. It's the God's eye seeing itself. And when you get to the place that's underneath the self, underneath the ego, underneath all of the brain experiences and characteristics and education and all the rest of it, the light itself sees itself. And when the light itself sees itself, then you know that there's no distance. And when there's no distance, then there's no animosity. There's no judgment. There's no desire to control or to own, because the light is the same in me as it is in you. And so you asked earlier what the purpose is. And to me, the purpose is to see the light inside the other, to see the light inside my enemy. When you see the light inside your enemy, you depower all of the anger and all of the potential for escalation. You see them as yourself, not because they're a human being, but because they're made out of light. And that is the only way humanity is ever going to survive as one people on a single planet, because we are so tribal, and we have now dominated the world. We are everywhere, and our cultural tribes are pushing up against each other. So if not now, in the history of the world, with 70 million near-death experiencers, if not now, when? Now is the most important time, because now is the time we're at the greatest risk globally.
Can you explain what is this light?
It's a metaphor. The word we use for light is a metaphor. It is not a thing. It is, well, you feel this energy. You can call it energy. People call it the universe. People call it radiance. People call it bliss.
What is the hierarchy between God, you, and the creation? Can you explain the differences and still that it's all one?
In terms of the hierarchy, it's very difficult to explain infinity. Infinity has no beginning and no end. And so I'm a differentiated soul. I'm differentiated from the divine. I have a limited nature. But the deeper you go into the divine, into the infinite, the more layers of the differentiation peel off and peel off and peel off. So for instance, someone might say, I had this incredible mystical experience where I understood the purpose of my life, and it was the most powerful mystical experience ever. And then they have another mystical experience that is deeper than that one, and I now understand the purpose of my children's lives. It was the most mystical experience ever, and it just keeps going. Everyone thinks that they're at the ultimate level, and nobody is. Everybody has a partial experience. And so there is a place of unity that is beyond limitation, where unlimitedness becomes a unified self again. And I want that, because in that place is all power and no more limitation and no more selfhood. And I've touched into that place. And even though I touched into that place as a limited form, I saw enough to know that even my limited form can be obliterated in a beautiful way.
Shlomo Solomon, he was, as people know, the smartest man. He had divine wisdom. It wasn't his wisdom. And he wanted to heal the world with God wisdom, the wisdom of love. So he could ask anything from God, but the only thing that he asked from God is, please God, give me a listening heart. I think this is, it says everything. Like, we just need to listen. Can you tell us about the importance of listening?
It's what we were talking about before, is not asking for things, it's asking for the presence itself. When we're listening for the divine presence, we're not busy asking for anything or complaining or asking why. We're just listening for the stillness itself. And that is the essence of meditation and prayer. It is absolutely only listening. It's not asking, it's not interjecting, it's not thinking what you're going to say next. Because you ever notice in a conversation, people are like, they don't actually hear what you say? Busy thinking about, there's none of that when you're actually listening with your heart. The story of Solomon listening with his heart is the same story as every single mystic in the history of the world who learns the secret truth that the access to God is within, and the only way to access it is by stilling your mind. And when you still your mind, you're no longer thinking. And when you're no longer thinking, you're actually just listening to your heart. And you're not even actively listening to it. You're just being with it. And the whole point of having a listening heart is to shut down the running mind. The monkey mind is to shut that thing off so that we can just be. Just be. And the more we can, the moments of accumulation of beingness, they keep adding into us and accumulate over time. Every time you listen, every time Solomon listened, there was an extra dose of listening that he kept inside his heart. And there's always this accumulation of listening and listening and listening. And pretty soon, you don't need to ask for anything anymore at all. Because you realize that the most important thing is the act of listening. It is the presence itself. And when you access the presence itself, the unity of being, the oneness of being, then you get all these things, because it then radiates out into your life, and all of your choices and all of the interactions you have in the world, because you're carrying this quietude, this stillness, this listening heart inside you, and it impacts absolutely everything around you. It's the most powerful tool there is, I think. It's a higher form of thinking. With a heart that's listening, the natural tendency is to live a moral life. Morality doesn't arise out of a decision-making process when you have a listening heart. The morality arises out of the heart itself. And I will write my law upon their hearts, it says. And I think it's in the Psalms. That's the love is written on the heart. And out of that interconnection of listening, then we create less chaos in the world. We create more stability in the world by looking inward. It's always the way out is in.
What is the right thing to do?
Right. And sometimes it's a difficult choice sometimes. It's not always clean. So you fall in love with two people, you love both of them equally, but you can't marry both of them. You got to marry one of them. So you're going to choose one or the other, and you're going to break somebody's heart in the process. So even though you choose the right thing, it might not feel like the right thing for that person.
Yes.
And so there's some gray area in here, but it's all okay, because in the end, there's only love and only acceptance. And yeah, okay, it comes after death, when you no longer need your body and all was and will be well again. But that's a huge motivator for not blaming yourself for the choices that you face, and always using your heart as the
campus.
Yes, thank you. Exactly. Exactly. The balance point, all those things. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to, near-death experiencers, they take a shortcut and they come back to their bodies again, but they're back in their bodies again. And even though they have this wisdom that comes with them, it's this much of it compared to what it was on the other side. You only get to carry a little tiny bit back. So how do you maximize that little tiny bit? You have to go, like every other mystic in the history of the world, you have to use the tools that have been left behind in order to carve a space inside yourself for more of the connectedness to the presence itself. And by connecting to the presence itself through listening, a listening heart, a listening mind, it just naturally comes out into the world. Doesn't mean you make every right choice there is, but you're always leaning toward the light in every single choice that you make. And if everybody's leaning toward the light in every choice that they make, the whole thing gets better. It gets better for everybody.
You said that it felt like you squeezed to your body, and it wasn't easy. Did you have had any after effects after your experience?
Oh yeah, my whole world is an after effect. There's a lot of different kinds of after effects. Some of them are kind of otherworldly, and some of them are just practical. I guess the most dominant after effect I have is that I can never escape that I'm inside my body looking out my eyes. I can shut it off for, like, if I'm in a flow of playing sports or reading a book or doing something where I'm occupying my mind, then I can forget that I'm inside my body looking out. But most of the time that's not true. And so I'm always living what I call non-attached to the world. I'm not detached. It's not some sort of psychological state of detachment or depersonalization or that kind of thing. It's that the whole world is an illusion. I know this is like, it feels to me like I live inside the Matrix, only it's not the evil overlord, you know, the movies, the Matrix, yeah, with the machines, but I live inside a coding system. I live inside this thing that it's always apparent to me that it's not real, always. And so that is the most pervasive after effect I have of every single moment of my life. But then there's a bunch of other after effects too. There's this sort of living outside of time. I like time shifts. Like I see what's going to happen before it happens, just moments before. So I'm always somehow, time is sort of elastic for me. And I have electromagnetic radiation problems with electronics, radio frequencies, watches. I've been hit by lightning. I have fearlessness about death. I am utterly unafraid of dying. I'm always aware of that I'm not alone. I have God. God never leaves me alone. I am never alone.
It feels like we need to ask for permission from God to give us words for this huge experience, and we don't have words, but it feels like that we're coming back with a clue about the DNA of our souls, all of our souls, like the qualities of the soul, and then we try to integrate. There is no shortcut for NDEs, because we still need to integrate this love that we've been and that we know that we are. How can we explain also the DNA of all of our souls, and also the way to integrate this love, not only for people who had this experience?
Well, for people that have had the experience, there is a long process of integration. And for me, it took 20 years to really become stable in the world in a way that I'm more functional, I'm more integrated here. For other people, it's the same tool set for near-death experiencers as it is for everybody else. It's the interior work of a listening heart. That is the same tools that everybody has access to and everybody could pursue if they chose to. Most people don't. And I've met plenty of NDEers who don't have a meditative life or an interior life, and it's harder. It's harder to integrate when you can't touch the thing as directly that defines your life. The more you can touch the thing that defines your life, the easier it is. It took divine grace for me to fully integrate here. I just didn't do it by myself. It took God and a mystical experience to kind of set me on my rights, to be able to function here. As long as you find the light inside yourself, you'll see it in others. And when you see it in them, you transmit some of it to them, and then they see it. It's more like, it's a sharing. It's a remembrance, as you mentioned earlier, but it's this sharing that shows when you share the light with someone and they see it inside you, they're seeing the same thing that's inside themselves with the same eye that you're looking at them with. There's only one eye. There's the one eye of God, and it looks through all of us. And if we are able to see that in another person, then they can see it in us. That's the way it works. When we gather together in a crowd of people who are carrying the light, it's easier for everybody who enters into the crowd to see it. And so when people come to the Iands conferences, one of the reasons why near-death experiencers go is to meet each other and to bathe in each other's light.
Yes.
But that's the same reason other people go, because it's like this huge bubble of light that they can walk into. And so when you walk into a collective of real spiritual people who are actually practicing selflessness, people who have the light inside them and they know that it's not their own. And,
Yes.
and when they're humble, because humility is a big part of this, then they get to bathe in it.
I love it when you said, like, it's not ours.
And that's, to me, that's one of the ways I know a real near-death experiencer from a fake one, or a real mystic from a fake one, because a real mystic has no pride in it. Because a real mystic, once you see yourself in comparison to the infinite unity of all being, and you see that you're nothing, then it's really difficult to pretend that you're anything other than that. I was blind. I was asleep and now I'm awake. I now know that this is the dream, and that I was in the reality. And once I know that, I can't unknow that. And so when I came back into my body again, my perception of the world was entirely different. My perception of everybody in the world was entirely different. I came back devoid of all belief systems. No belief in culture. I didn't believe in, I wear the clothes of my culture. I've adapted to the culture I live in. I've been adapting now for 40 years. So I'm pretty good at passing off for where I live and what I'm supposed to look like for where I live. But none of it's permanent to me. None of it's real to me. Specifically though, I'm the same soul that was in this body before. And I just know that I've been here before in this space.
So what is eternal?
What is eternal?
Yes.
Oh, that's unspeakable. And
what goes with us, because no material
goes with us. No, nothing that's a thing comes with us. No thing. And for me, no sense of self. I had to give up my sense of self. When I went through all the suffering that I went through, I gave up myself in that process. When I was infilled, I was no longer me. There was no me left. The only way you're going to be able to see and understand eternity is to catch a glimpse of it yourself. It's like that orange again. I can't tell you what it tastes like. I can describe it to you, but it's inadequate. Eternal is everything that's not limited, and everything's limited. Everything's a thing. The only thing that's not a thing is God. And so one of the things that I talked about a lot in the past and stopped talking about is that there was nothing on the other side. There was nothingness. God is no thing. God is nothing. And people are like, well, God's nothing? Well, it's no thing that is a thing, so it's a not thing. That's eternity. It's where there are no conceptions. God had no religion. God had no gender. God had no anything. There was nothing there except for conscious love, intellect.
Yes.
Peter, we want to say thank you so much. You are a big inspiration for us, and I'm sure for a lot of people. And thank you for sharing with us your experiences, your insights,
your profound knowledge.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you too for inviting me into your home and into your podcast and into your country, because this is a global phenomenon. It doesn't belong to anybody. It belongs to everyone. Yes. And I hope that all of your listeners will discover that if they're not a near-death experiencer, then that they probably know one. And that person may not have the courage to speak up, but maybe they will if they hear that you talk about it. And then maybe you can discover that it's not so strange as you think it is. I want to give you thanks again for having me, though. I was super thrilled to be able to speak in Israel. It's just awesome to me.
Yeah.
Toda rabba.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, both of you. God bless you both. Peace to you.